Hello everyone and welcome to the channel that provides insightful content about personal growth and development through the perspective of good books. Today, we're going to explore a theme that might seem simple but holds many deep layers: loneliness. In our journey of seeking inner peace, we often hear the adage a strong soul starts from enjoying loneliness. But what does enjoying loneliness really mean? Does it mean being able to live alone, silently enduring sadness? Does it mean rejecting social connection, not needing many friends or a lover, and telling yourself that I'm fine alone? Is the celebration of loneliness creating a trend where many people unknowingly build an invisible wall between themselves and the outside world? Psychologist H.T. Kai argues that compulsive addictive behaviors reveal that you haven't learned to manage your relationship with the world. For example, you're busy and have no time, but when you're free, you spend hours scrolling through short videos. You know it's wrong, but you're addicted, both immersed in entertainment and hating yourself. If you recognize yourself in these behaviors, it's a sign of a deeper loneliness inside. This loneliness is not a nurturing force, nor is it something to be enjoyed. The book we'll discuss today, tentatively translated as Just Enough Loneliness by psychologist H.T. Kai, provides a delicate and fresh perspective, distinguishing between toxic and nurturing loneliness. The author argues that enjoying loneliness is not just about dealing with your inner world, but also confronting the relationship between yourself and the world. To truly enjoy loneliness and use it to create a rich and powerful life, you need to live with just enough loneliness. Let's begin, and please remember to subscribe for great content. Now, let's listen to a talk called Just Enough Loneliness, the nourishing material of your life based on today's book. Re-examining loneliness. Distinguishing loneliness from solitude. Most people confuse loneliness with solitude. Solitude is an external state where you have no one around, no one caring for you. For example, you attend a party where everyone is a stranger, and they all know each other, laughing and talking while you struggle to fit in. You yearn for someone to notice you, but no one initiates a conversation. At this point, you feel solitude. This feeling is similar to wanting to find someone to confide in but scrolling through your contact list and not knowing who to call. You're left to face your sadness alone. This is solitude. But loneliness is different. Loneliness is an internal feeling. Even when you have people around you, you still feel unhappy because they don't understand your thoughts and emotions. Psychologist Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness is not because no one is around, but because you cannot share your most important feelings with others." For example, you and your lover have been together for a while, but you only talk about everyday things. When you need to confide, when you face difficulties, or when you have an idea or joy you want to share, they cannot understand you. Then, you feel lonely in a noisy world. The feeling of loneliness seems inevitable in life, whether you know many people or have a lover or family by your side. Even when you're sitting in the middle of parties, having coffee with friends, you cannot find true joy, and you feel lonely. And loneliness is the very nature of human existence. This is an existential truth. Philosopher Martin Heidegger used the term thrownness to describe the presence of loneliness from the moment you're born. We enter the world carrying a unique emotional baggage. Each person is an individual, and not everyone can truly enter our inner world. As Zhuangzi asked, "You are not a fish, how do you know the joy of a fish?" This is an existential truth. The presence of others cannot erase the feeling of loneliness. In Virginia Woolf's book A Room of One's Own, there is a quote that states everyone has a room of his own, which none may dare to violate. Loneliness is unavoidable, but it's not scary. Loneliness only becomes a negative state when you face it with unease. The author divides loneliness into three types. First, there's self-imposed loneliness or self-isolation. This manifests when a person has a closed-off personality, doesn't create opportunities to connect with others, doesn't want to socialize, and only wants to withdraw into their own space. Sometimes, when others initiate a conversation, they feel burdened. The key point is that they like being alone but still feel sad due to loneliness. The second type is passive loneliness. This occurs when you don't actively separate yourself from the world but want to build deep connections with others, yet you cannot share your whole self. The relationships only stay on the surface, not enough to understand and feel each other fully. At this point, you often feel disappointed and powerless. Finally, There's active loneliness. An actively lonely person volunteers to be alone. For them, loneliness is freedom from noise. Some people enjoy the peace of being alone, and though they might sometimes be bored, they don't feel insecure. They see it as a voluntary choice, a way to avoid meaningless social interactions, even an absolute pleasure. As a writer wrote, "How wonderful are the silent moments when we are reborn in our own solitude." Looking at these three types of loneliness, you'll realize that self-imposed loneliness stems from separation from the outside world, but this separation might stem from the need to seek safety, a way to avoid potential hurt. Passive loneliness reflects a deep longing to be understood and recognized in relationships. And for those who are actively lonely, what allows them to find joy in being alone? They can even turn loneliness into a sophisticated and high-class way of life. The main reason is that people with active loneliness often have the ability to manage behaviors that make them no longer afraid of loneliness. Whereas others might remain stuck in self-imposed or passive loneliness if they don't understand the deeper psychology behind their behavior and only hear encouragement like enjoy loneliness, they'll keep negative loneliness in their hearts, unable to escape the cycle. One of the first behaviors that makes people fear loneliness is hiding themselves. Like comedians, they make the world laugh but often cry when they're alone. Many people live with such a mask. I've witnessed supermoms who always try to be the ideal in everyone's eyes, a nurturing mother, a capable wife, and an excellent employee. Behind that strong exterior is an exhausted soul. Every night, when everyone else is sleeping, alone in the kitchen, loneliness surges. Or those who are always cheerful, the life of every party, always knowing how to make others laugh, but at home, they sit silently for hours, scrolling aimlessly on their phones. Those who are obedient and high-achieving, the pride of their families, but fear disappointing their parents and being judged by their peers, they've never revealed their frustration with their current major. They force themselves to study hard, but deep down, they feel like soulless machines. Then there are those with stable careers and happy families. However, behind this perfect exterior, they don't dare to admit that they're trapped in a painful emotional life for fear of social judgment, continuing to play the role of a model husband, a happy wife, and many other masks. They're forced to suppress their true feelings to meet the expectations of the outside world. Psychologist Carl Jung said, "We cannot shine when we constantly deny our own darkness." When you try to be perfect in the eyes of society, always maintain your appearance, fear being rejected, fear being hurt, you'll become increasingly alienated from yourself. And that's why you fear loneliness, because you can't remove your mask. You need an audience to watch your performance, but even you become a stranger. The second behavior that makes people fear loneliness is facing the world as a never-ending battlefield. Adler once said, "Everyone wants to have a sense of superiority, but when that desire is distorted into a race to win, it becomes a barrier separating you from genuine connection." People are obsessed with competing, judging right and wrong, turning others into opponents to overcome, forgetting that in the battle to be better than others, they've lost themselves. Adler also pointed out that the opposite of the feeling of superiority is an inferiority complex, meaning that the more people try to be superior by comparing themselves to others, the more they're filled with insecurity. People trapped in this cycle ultimately only receive loneliness. They become their own enemies, not daring to stop for fear of being left behind. So, how can you harmonize with a world that you always see as an opponent? How can you feel real love when you're obsessed with calculations? Therefore, for those who are exhausted on the racetrack, loneliness will always be painful. The third behavior that makes people fear loneliness is narcissism, overestimating oneself. Psychologist Donald Winnicott pointed out that narcissistic people often live in a false self. The false self always has layers of protection, built based on expectations of others. Therefore, narcissistic people's relationships are often superficial, lacking true connection. There are three types of narcissism in relationships. First, parallel narcissism. These are people who imagine that others need to be like them. In relationships, they only want others to change according to them, not wanting to change themselves. In this case, they are imposing their own standards on others, and when they don't find similarities, the relationship becomes difficult to maintain. Second, grandiose narcissism. These are people who like to show off themselves to impress others. For example, a person constantly posts photos with celebrities to prove their high status, even though they have no real connection. Third, idealized narcissism. These are people who act for their ideal self-image instead of acting out on their own inner motives. For example, many people edit photos and post seemingly perfect moments on social media, like luxurious vacations, beautiful dishes, or clever and profound captions. They do these things not because they truly enjoy those moments, but because they want to show off that they have a fulfilling, fun, and perfect life. However, the more they chase after outer appearances, the further they move away from their true selves. All three of these states make a person increasingly lonely because they revolve around the need to glorify themselves, preventing genuine connection with themselves and others. The final behavior that makes people suffer from loneliness is always trying to sacrifice for others. A person with a sacrificial personality often pushes their true needs and feelings deep into their subconscious, where they become a repository of suppressed desires. For example, a mother always gives the delicious food to her child but doesn't dare to admit that she herself also wants to enjoy it. Or a person who believes that loving means sacrificing themselves, enduring and tolerating all the other person's behaviors, but deep down they cannot accept many things about them. Gradually, they lose connection with their true selves. Moreover, a person with a sacrificial personality often plays the role of a giver, always helping without expecting anything in return. However, this is not unconditional giving but contains the expectation of being recognized. When they don't receive recognition, the sacrificial person will feel miserable and lonely. Why do I love him so much but he doesn't love me, etc. In contrast, the receiver feels pressured by the feeling of being indebted, leading to distance between the two people. Psychologist Adler emphasized that relationships are only sustainable when both sides feel valuable. People with a sacrificial personality will never be able to enjoy loneliness because they always suppress their true feelings and cannot have a balanced relationship. So, how do we free ourselves from the fear of loneliness? Loneliness, strength or burden? It all depends on whether you can maintain just enough loneliness. The author points out the concept of just enough loneliness. This is the appropriate state of loneliness that helps you live happily as yourself in society. Humans are social creatures, unable to exist without connection, but losing your individuality to be recognized and understood by others can lead to the opposite result. If there is a lack of connection with the outside world, loneliness becomes a burden, easily leading to depression or a feeling of meaninglessness. Just enough loneliness lies in the balance, meaning you can maintain personal space while building quality relationships. Just enough loneliness is not too little to be dependent on others, nor too much to fall into isolation. In essence, people who fear loneliness do so because they desire a stable object to escape it. This object can be understood as someone who can meet your emotional needs, bring comfort, make you feel respected, listen to you, someone who provides peace like a safe haven when you need support. If you can connect with such a confidant, it's wonderful. However, if that person isn't available, or if they are uninterested, the anxiety of loneliness will appear. Therefore, to turn loneliness into nourishment, you need to recognize that the ideal stable object shouldn't depend on someone else but should come from within yourself. The most important thing is to learn self-acceptance. As Fromm said, loneliness is not when you are alone, but when you cannot connect with yourself. That's when you realize that true loneliness doesn't come from the absence of others but from the lack of self-understanding and acceptance. Accept yourself as imperfect so that you can live well with your true self. When you stop torturing yourself because you feel you're not good enough, stop comparing yourself to others, let go of the desire to be recognized for what you've given, when you're no longer afraid of being rejected or hurt, you'll feel peace within yourself. And even when no one truly understands you anymore, when you accept yourself, you can also easily accept the shortcomings and weaknesses of others. As Brené Brown, a researcher on vulnerability, said, "We cannot have authentic connection with others without daring to show our true selves. Take off your masks and live your truth, and you can see the world through a genuine lens, easily building sincere connections. You'll no longer feel lonely in fake relationships and will easily recognize relationships that aren't worth pursuing. You'll stop forcing yourself to make meaningless friends, and quality relationships will show you that you're not alone on this journey." One way to enjoy loneliness is to enrich your life experiences. Many people equate richness with prosperity and wealth, spending their lives thinking only about making money or surpassing others. In reality, that kind of life, no matter how much wealth you accumulate, will leave you feeling empty inside. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, physiological and safety needs are at the bottom. If a person spends too much energy on these, it's hard to feel rich. True richness comes from doing work that stems from a clear understanding of what's important in your journey of building value. That's when you have a creative job where you are completely immersed in the flow, finding joy and presence in every breath, from reading books, exercising, or doing things you love. When you're completely at peace in the moment of sitting alone, meditating, breathing in nature, this is what leads to rich inner experiences. When you see your flaws and accept yourself, living with such an inner self, you'll be able to actively connect with the world and also be able to actively enjoy loneliness. A poet wrote, "Loneliness is where we meet ourselves, where we learn to love the gaps, and then realize they are full of meaning." May the loneliness in you be enough to see yourself truly exist, instead of acting in illusionary plays, just enough for you to find the missing pieces inside when interacting with others, just enough for you to understand that every moment alone is an opportunity to recreate, renew, and love yourself. When you accept loneliness as an indispensable part of richness, you'll realize that nothing is more precious than being true to yourself. As Lao Tzu taught, knowing others is intelligence, knowing yourself is true wisdom. I hope you can face your true self, savor every step in just enough loneliness, so that each step allows you to live slowly, deeply, and authentically. If you find this video helpful, please share it with those lonely souls you see out there. Share the love so we all know we'll meet each other with our truest selves. Thank you for listening. Each like and comment helps me connect with you and allows this video to reach more people who need it. Thank you with all my sincerity. See you in the next videos. And subscribe to the channel for more great self-improvement content.